Hey everyone, happy holidays. Yeah, it's Christmas, but we're diving into something kind of heavy today. We're going to be talking about the things that can lead to a plane crash.
Definitely a serious topic for sure, but an important one too.
Exactly. Our listener is particularly interested in an Azerbaijan Airlines flight and what might have happened. And while this is a really sensitive subject, we're going to approach it with respect. The goal is to understand what went wrong, not to make a spectacle out of a tragedy.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, it's never just one thing that causes a plane crash. It's usually a whole bunch of different factors that unfortunately all come together at the same time.
That's what we're going to unpack today. So, for starters, we know we're looking into an Azerbaijan Airlines flight. But before we get too deep into that specific crash, I think it's helpful to zoom out for a second. Just think about all the things that have to go right every time a plane takes off. It's mind-blowing, really.
Totally. You've got the technology, of course, but then you've also got the pilots, the air traffic controllers, the maintenance crews.
And let's not forget about the weather. It's a whole system, super intricate with a ton of moving parts.
Exactly. Aviation is really a marvel when you think about it. So many systems have to work in perfect harmony to get a plane safely from point A to point B.
Speaking of those systems, when you hear plane crash, what's the first thing that pops into your head? What kind of technical issue?
I'd say engine failure is usually what folks think of first. But honestly, it's rarely as simple as an engine just quitting. Take, for example, something like a fan blade breaking off inside the engine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the shrapnel from that can rip through all sorts of important components, and that can lead to a total loss of power. Actually, this happened with a Southwest Airlines flight a few years back. A passenger died because of debris from the engine. Tragic.
Definitely.
But then there are also things like malfunctions in the control systems. Those are the hydraulics and computers that let the pilots actually steer the plane.
Right.
If those go haywire, you're in a real bad spot.
It's scary to think how many things can potentially go wrong. I guess that's why the aviation industry is so strict about safety and maintenance, right?
Absolutely. The stakes are just too high to cut any corners. But even with all the tech and regulations, the human factor is still a major element in all of this, isn't it?
You're telling me?
I mean, you and I both know pilot error plays a role in a lot of accidents. And that doesn't just mean like bad flying skills or anything. It's also about things like making the right call under pressure, managing fatigue, communicating clearly with air traffic control, and keeping a cool head when things get stressful.
Makes sense.
And one tiny mistake or lapse in judgment can set off a whole chain of events. It's like a domino effect. There's this thing in aviation safety called the Swiss cheese model. Have you heard of that?
I think so, but remind me.
Well, picture a stack of Swiss cheese slices. Each slice has holes in it, right? Each hole represents a point where something could go wrong. On their own, those holes aren't a huge deal. But if they line up just right, well, then you've got a path straight through the whole stack. That's when accidents happen.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the stuff that can happen inside the plane itself, but what about the stuff outside? Like, everyone knows that weather can delay flights, but can it actually cause a plane to crash?
Oh, definitely. I mean, bad weather is a big deal for pilots. We're talking thunderstorms, fog, crazy strong winds. It can get hairy up there. For example, there's something called wind shear.
Oh, yeah.
That's when the wind speed and direction change super fast and sudden. It's like when you're driving down the highway and hit a patch of black ice.
You should hate that.
Right. It's that same jarring, out-of-nowhere shift, except it's happening thousands of feet in the air. Wind shear can make a plane lose lift all of a sudden. That makes it almost impossible to control. And then you've got things like bird strikes, which thankfully aren't super common but can be a real problem, especially during takeoff. Imagine a whole flock of geese hitting an engine. And volcanic ash, too. It can gum up the engines and cause them to fail.
Okay, so let's say the worst happens and a plane does crash.
Yeah.
How do investigators figure out what went wrong with all these potential factors at play?
Well, that's where the black boxes come in. The flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, they're like the unsung heroes of aviation investigations.
Right. They can survive just about anything, right?
Pretty much. Intense impact, crazy heat, no problem. The flight data recorder tracks all sorts of data. Altitude, airspeed, how the engines are performing, even the pilot's inputs. It paints a really detailed picture of what the plane was doing. And the cockpit voice recorder, it picks up everything that's said in the cockpit. Conversations between the pilots, communication with air traffic control, any other sounds. It helps investigators piece together the chain of events and understand what decisions were made.
It's like a giant, really complicated puzzle, right?
Exactly. They have to analyze every single piece of evidence super carefully. Aviation accident investigations can take a long time. Sometimes it can be years. And they involve tons of experts, pilots, engineers, meteorologists, human factors people, you name it. They examine the wreckage, analyze the data from the black boxes, interview witnesses, go over maintenance records. It's a huge undertaking.
Wow. So for our listener out there, knowing all of this, does it change how they should think about air travel? Should we all be scared to fly now?
Nah, I don't think it's about being scared. It's about being aware. Understanding the complexities of flying can help us appreciate the incredible safety measures that are in place. Plus, it shows how much the industry is constantly learning and improving. After every accident, there's a thorough investigation, and the findings are used to make everything safer. The planes, the protocols, pilot training, everything gets better.
That's actually really reassuring.
It is, right. Even with the risks, flying is statistically one of the safest ways to travel. And behind the scenes, there are some seriously brilliant people working around the clock to make it even safer.
Well, that's a good thought to end on. We appreciate you joining us for this deep dive, everyone. And we hope you all have a safe and happy holiday season.